Tira nodded, stepping toward the window that framed the vast, cold void of space. Beyond the asteroid belt, the small, blue planet gleamed, a stark contrast to their war-ravaged homeworld. This was Earth. The place they had come to understand, to admire in secret. Not for its military power, but for its paradoxical reluctance to fully embrace warfare. That had drawn them in, not just as defectors, but as curious observers of a species that thrived despite their hesitance to dominate. "We never should have been fascinated by them," Zhao muttered, her frustration bubbling over. "We're warriors, not diplomats." Tira remained silent. She had once thought the same. A high-ranking commander in the Empire's fleet, her life had revolved around conquest. Subjugation of weaker species. The glory of victory. She had been relentless in her pursuit of domination, believing it was the natural order of the universe. But humans were different. They didn't conquer the way other species did. They fought, yes, but often with hesitation, seeking alternatives to total destruction. It was this restraint, this confusion that had sparked her doubt. As the Empire continued its bloody expansion, Tira's attention shifted. She began tuning into human broadcasts, absorbing their history, their conflicts, their moments of cooperation. The more she watched, the more she questioned. Zha stood beside her, shaking her head. "They're weak. We've seen it, Commander. They could have crushed their own enemies hundreds of times over, but they hesitate." Tira's gaze remained on the small planet. "They hesitate, yes. But what if it's not weakness? What if it's something else?" Zha scoffed, but Tira pressed on. "We've crushed hundreds of civilizations because they refused to fight us the way we wanted. They tried to negotiate, to cooperate. We thought them weak, but humans—" She paused. "Humans thrive, not despite their reluctance for war, but because of it." The silence was heavy. The crew, hardened by decades of battle, found the concept alien. But Tira had spent years studying Earth, fascinated by moments where humanity chose peace over victory, diplomacy over destruction. World wars, countless skirmishes, each was a study in how they fought, then chose to lay down arms. She had never seen anything like it. It defied everything their empire stood for. Tira turned from the window, her mind set. "We didn't defect because we were weak. We defected because we saw a future in which constant war doesn't have to be the answer. Earth has that potential, and we need to learn from it." Zha's brow furrowed. "And you think they'll welcome us? We're fugitives. Defectors. They'll see us as invaders, no better than the Empire." Tira exhaled slowly. "Perhaps. But we've seen enough to know they're different. And maybe that's why they'll listen." The crew exchanged uncertain glances. Tira knew the risk. Humans had their flaws. They could be unpredictable, violent even. But unlike her empire, they didn't seem to revel in it. Violence, for them, was often the last resort, not the first. And that was the sliver of hope she clung to. Tira motioned to the central control panel, her heart pounding in her chest. "Initiate first contact." As the ship's systems whirred to life, the crew scrambled to prepare. Earth's communication networks lit up on the screen, and for a brief moment, Tira hesitated. What if they were wrong? What if humanity was no different from the countless civilizations they had subjugated? What if the peace she sought was nothing but an illusion? She dismissed the thoughts. It was too late for doubt now. They had made their choice the moment they defected. "Open the channel," Tira ordered, her voice unwavering. The crew followed her command, and soon, the hum of Earth's radio frequencies filled the ship. Tira straightened, her mind focused. This was the moment they had prepared for, the moment that could either lead to salvation or utter disaster. "Attention, Earth," Tira began, her voice calm but deliberate. "This is Commander Tira of the Altharian Defectors. We seek an audience with your leaders. We come in peace, seeking alliance and understanding. We ask for your trust, as we place ours in you." The message was sent, and now all they could do was wait. Seconds ticked by, each one heavier than the last. Earth's response would determine everything. The crews shifted nervously, the weight of their decision pressing down on them. Tira stood tall, though her heart raced. They had thrown themselves at the mercy of a species known for both its capacity for compassion and its history of conflict. A small, red light blinked on the console. Earth had received their message. Tira exhaled, her eyes fixed on the glowing planet before them. What came next could change everything. "Prepare for their response," she said quietly. Inside war rooms across the globe, military leaders were already on edge, reviewing footage of the ship and discussing what level of threat it posed. No one wanted to act hastily, but the presence of defectors from a militaristic galactic empire sounded too much like a trap. Whispers of an impending invasion or manipulation spread through the intelligence agencies, heightening the tension. Earth had seen enough of its own conflicts to know that peace offers often came with hidden blades. It wasn't long before governments across the world agreed on a plan. A task force of diplomats and military personnel would meet with the aliens in a secure location. No risks would be taken. The global leaders weren't naive. If the alien defectors were sincere, they needed to be handled with care, but if they weren't, Earth's defenses had to be ready to act. The diplomatic meeting was held in a heavily fortified military base far from any major population centers. Security was tight, with military jets on standby and defense systems primed. Inside the negotiation room, tension hung thick in the air. Representatives from several of Earth's most powerful nations sat around the long table, each looking wary, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. The aliens entered with measured calm, their otherworldly appearance drawing immediate scrutiny. Commander Tira stepped forward, her face impassive but her posture deliberately non-threatening. She understood the importance of this moment. The weight of hundreds of years of conquest and warfare hung over her like a shadow, but she stood resolute, knowing this was their best chance at survival. The human diplomats began with pleasantries, but the military officials wasted no time diving into the heart of their concerns. "Why have you come to Earth?" The question was sharp, almost accusatory, as a general leaned forward, eyes scanning every movement the aliens made. The suspicion was palpable. Tira responded calmly, stating her case. They were fugitives, defectors from a war-driven empire, seeking refuge and a chance to learn from Earth's ways of diplomacy. But the humans weren't convinced so easily. "What guarantees do we have that this isn't a ruse? That your empire isn't planning an attack and using you to soften us up?" Another representative asked, his voice steady, but filled with doubt. Tira anticipated this. "We left everything behind. The empire we once served has no interest in peace. They see it as weakness. We began to see it as a strength. Your world is unique, and that is why we've come. We believe there's another way to resolve conflict, one without endless war." The humans exchanged glances, skeptical. Their world had known enough betrayal in its history. Why would an advanced alien species suddenly abandon their empire and seek refuge on a planet with far less technological power? One of the senior diplomats raised a hand. "Your empire, what is the likelihood they will come for you? If we offer you sanctuary, are we inviting a war we cannot win?" The room grew still. Tira had no choice but to be direct. "It is highly likely they will come. They do not tolerate betrayal. But that is why we need you. Earth's ability to resist total warfare has been remarkable. Your species survives not by sheer power, but by strategy, diplomacy, and resilience. If we combine our knowledge, perhaps there's a way to resist them without total annihilation." Another general shook his head. "Resisting is one thing. But what you're asking could drag us into a galactic conflict we're not ready for. We've fought our own wars, we know how ugly they get. Are you asking us to fight for you? Or are you asking us to fight alongside you?" Tira met his gaze. "I am asking you to fight for yourselves. Your world will be at risk whether you choose to help us or not. But together, we may stand a chance at stopping the Empire before they can reach you." The humans leaned back, mulling over her words. The weight of the decision was enormous. Trusting these defectors could either open a pathway to peace or invite disaster. The intense questioning continued. The defectors were pressed on every detail: why they had left, what they knew about Earth, and how their empire would react if they found them here. Tira's composure never faltered, though inside she knew this was the moment that would determine everything. One of the diplomats, a woman with a soft but firm voice, leaned forward. "You said your people once viewed us as weak. Why? What changed your mind?" Tira hesitated for only a moment before answering. "At first, we saw your reluctance to engage in total war as a flaw. Our empire believed that conquest and dominance were the only paths to survival. But the more we watched, the more we realized that your reluctance was not a sign of weakness, but of wisdom. You understand something we've long forgotten, that not all battles are won with weapons. And that is why we believe in you now." The room fell silent. The words hung heavy, sinking into the minds of the humans present. They didn't trust easily, and war had hardened them over centuries, but there was something about the defectors' sincerity that couldn't be ignored. Still, it was clear the decision was far from made. The human leaders were divided. Some saw the potential for an alliance that could boost Earth's standing in the galaxy. They envisioned the benefits of shared technology, knowledge, and diplomacy. Others, however, were deeply skeptical. The looming threat of the Empire cast a long shadow, and the idea of trusting former war commanders didn't sit well with them. "How can we know you won't turn on us if the Empire offers you a way back?" one representative asked. Reports flooded in about the small band of rebels, led by Commander Tira, slipping through the Empire's grasp. What made matters worse was their destination, Earth. A primitive world by the Empire's standards, yet dangerous in its potential to inspire subversive ideas. The High Council would not tolerate the notion that a planet so reluctant toward warfare could somehow provide refuge to defectors of their mighty fleet. It was an affront to everything they stood for. Without delay, the Council authorized the dispatch of a fleet, the Empire's finest ships armed to the teeth with the destructive power that had subjugated countless worlds. The mission was simple: hunt down and eliminate the defectors. No negotiations, no second chances. The fleet set off, cutting through the stars with a singular purpose. Earth was now marked, not just as a refuge for traders, but as a potential threat that needed to be brought under control, or destroyed. Meanwhile, back on Earth, tensions were rising. In a secure, windowless room beneath layers of security, human leadership gathered once again. The knowledge that the Empire had sent a fleet bearing down on their planet weighed heavily on everyone. For hours, diplomats and military officials debated the path forward. The diplomats, still holding on to the hope that an alliance with the defectors could benefit Earth, pushed for cooperation. They argued that Tira and her crew represented a rare opportunity to advance Earth's standing in the galactic sphere. Access to their knowledge and technology could be invaluable in facing a threat of this magnitude. "We have a chance to gain allies in a conflict that's coming whether we like it or not," one diplomat insisted. But the military leaders were far less optimistic. To them, the defectors were a liability. Trusting them, even with their apparent sincerity, carried too much risk. They emphasized that Earth's own defenses were inadequate against the full might of the Empire. "We've barely scratched the surface of space travel, and now we're supposed to stand up to a galactic empire?" a general pointed out grimly. The thought of Earth becoming the battleground for an alien civil war was unthinkable to them. Humanity's vulnerabilities were laid bare in that room. Despite their bravado, the military leaders knew that Earth was not ready for a conflict on this scale. The diplomats argued that they couldn't turn away from this challenge. It was no longer a matter of if the Empire would come, but when. But deep down, there was fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of what could happen if they sided with the defectors and the Empire retaliated in full force. The debate dragged on, with no clear consensus. Each side was locked in their position, the mistrust of the defectors permeating every argument. Humanity's leadership was split, torn between the desire for peace and the reality that they might be facing annihilation. It was during this stalemate that Tira and her team issued a formal warning to Earth's leaders. Summoned back into the tense negotiations, Tira laid out the stark reality of the situation. The Empire's fleet was en route, and they were not coming for a diplomatic discussion. Earth had a choice to make: stand with the defectors and prepare to face the Empire, or remain neutral and risk being destroyed or enslaved as punishment for harboring traitors. Tira's words were blunt but honest. The Empire will not negotiate with you. If they find us here, they will treat your planet as they have every other world that's defied them. They will either subjugate you or wipe you out. But there is another way. We've seen Earth's strength, not in warfare, but in diplomacy. That's why we came here. The warning hung in the air like a storm cloud, impossible to ignore. Some leaders remained skeptical, questioning whether Earth's alliance with the defectors would make any real difference. But Tira remained firm. You have a chance to resist, not through weapons alone, but by outmaneuvering them. You've done it before on your own world. We can help you do it on a galactic scale. Still, the doubt was palpable. Could Earth truly stand a chance against an empire that had crushed entire civilizations? Could diplomacy be enough to stop the inevitable clash? As the meeting ended, the weight of the decision pressed harder on every human involved. The threat wasn't abstract anymore, it was very real, and it was closing in fast. Across the world, news of the impending fleet began to leak out, though the full details were still withheld from the public. Whispers of alien warships approaching Earth created a mixture of fear and denial. Some people refused to believe it, convinced that it was some elaborate hoax or miscommunication. Others, more attuned to the growing unrest, began to panic. In private, Earth's leaders scrambled to prepare. Military forces were quietly mobilized, and strategic defenses were set in place, though everyone knew they weren't ready for a full-scale invasion from a galactic superpower. Panic spread through various government sectors, as some officials feared that whatever decision they made would lead to catastrophic consequences. The sheer scale of the looming conflict was overwhelming. Amidst the rising fear, however, there were those who steeled themselves for what was to come. The diplomatic teams and a few key military figures began preparing for negotiations, not only with the defectors but also for what they hoped might be a final opportunity to avoid a war they could not win. While many still doubted, there was a growing recognition that turning their backs on Tira and her crew would only leave Earth more vulnerable to the Empire's wrath. Earth's top military officials, alongside diplomats, technologists, and intelligence officers, discussed a different kind of defense. Their goal wasn't to overpower the Empire with firepower, but to outthink them. Humanity had a long history of survival through unconventional means, and this situation would be no different. Plans of guerrilla tactics, cyber warfare, and psychological strategies were drawn up. They would exploit the Empire's overconfidence, their reliance on brute strength, and their assumption that Earth would be easily crushed. We've faced enemies stronger than us before, one general said. But we've never been predictable. They'll come expecting submission or panic. We'll give them neither. The diplomats suggested a parallel approach. Earth would also extend an offer of negotiation, not out of desperation, but as a strategic move. By doing so, they would buy time, force the Empire to consider diplomacy as a possibility, and demonstrate Earth's unwillingness to be bullied. The strategy was bold, and it required precise timing, but it was a reflection of humanity's ability to think beyond the immediate threat, to look for solutions that didn't solely rely on violence. Across the table, Tira listened quietly, her mind racing. This was not the response she had expected when they first defected to Earth. Her experience with the Empire told her that most species under threat would immediately resort to all-out war or capitulation. But here was Earth, planning something else entirely. It wasn't that they lacked the will to fight, but rather that they were choosing to fight in a way that reflected their values. They weren't going to be drawn into a battle on the Empire's terms. They were going to redefine the battlefield itself. She exchanged a glance with Ja, who still seemed skeptical. Tira could sense the unspoken question in her second-in-command's eyes. Would this be enough? Could Earth truly stand against the Empire's might using strategy alone? But as she watched the humans, their unwavering determination, their willingness to adapt, something inside her shifted. This was why she had left the Empire. This was what had drawn her to Earth in the first place. They weren't backing down, but they weren't surrendering to the Empire's version of strength either. Their approach was uniquely human, driven by resilience and an understanding that survival didn't always mean overpowering your enemy. It could also mean outmaneuvering them. As the meeting progressed, Earth's leadership came to a consensus. They would not send out battleships to meet the Empire's fleet, nor would they engage in a conventional standoff. Instead, they would send a fleet of drones, not armed with weapons, but with a message. The drones would broadcast peaceful communication, urging the Empire to reconsider an immediate attack. But the message would not be one of submission. It would be firm, offering dialogue while making it clear that Earth would defend itself if necessary. It was a risk, but the leadership believed it was the best way to show that humanity would not be intimidated. They weren't seeking conflict, but they weren't going to be crushed under the Empire's heel either. The drones would also serve a secondary purpose, gathering intelligence on the Empire's fleet and movements, feeding critical data back to Earth's defense networks. Even in offering peace, they were preparing for every possibility. Tira watched as the plan took shape, and something stirred within her. This was not what her people would have done. The Empire would have seen diplomacy as a weakness, as a waste of time in the face of such an overwhelming threat. But humans saw it differently. To them, peace was a calculated move, a tool of strategy just as effective as any weapon. And in the face of overwhelming odds, they didn't falter, they adapted. This was why she had defected. Humanity's refusal to conform to the Empire's brutal logic wasn't naivety. It was strength in its purest form. They didn't rely on violence as their first and only solution. They fought for peace with the same intensity that others fought for conquest. Watching them now, Tira felt her admiration for them grow. She realized that Earth wasn't just a refuge from the Empire. It was a living example of the future she wanted to fight for. As the final preparations were made, Tira stood alongside the human leaders. Earth's fleet of drones was launched, broadcasting their message into the vastness of space. The Empire's fleet was closing in, but Earth would not be caught off guard. They were ready, not with weapons drawn, but with minds sharpened, plans laid, and a firm resolve to survive without sacrificing what made them who they were. In the calm before the storm, there was a moment of reflection. Tira allowed herself to step back and look at the bigger picture. Humanity, for all its flaws and contradictions, was a species that had endured countless hardships and wars. Yet here they were, refusing to abandon their principles even in the face of a galactic threat. Their strength wasn't in their weapons, though they had plenty. It was in their ability to unite, to cooperate, to adapt to circumstances that would break others. They were a paradox, these humans. Reluctant to embrace war, but stronger because of it. They didn't see themselves as conquerors, but as survivors, builders, and thinkers. And that, Tira realized, was why they had thrived where others had fallen. Their reluctance to fight didn't make them weak, it made them resilient. They had learned that not every war needed to be fought with violence, and that sometimes the strongest weapon was the ability to find another way. On the other side, Earth's drones floated in the void, small but strategically placed. They were unarmed, broadcasting peaceful communications, offering dialogue in the face of impending destruction. The drones repeated the message over and over. Earth sought no conflict but would defend itself if necessary. The strategy was clear: show restraint, but also resolve. Inside the Empire's flagship, the tension was palpable. The fleet commander, a cold, ruthless figure, listened to Earth's message with growing disdain. Peace? These humans dared to suggest peace? He had seen countless species fall under the Empire's rule, all of them crushed by the same force that now pointed its guns at Earth. He turned his gaze to the viewscreen, where the small blue planet waited below. To him, this was just another world to conquer, another species to subjugate. Yet, Commander Tira's voice cut through the silence of the bridge, transmitted from her small vessel now docked aboard the flagship. She and her fellow defectors had been brought before the Empire's leaders in a last-ditch effort to prevent the bloodshed. Tira spoke directly to her former superiors, her voice steady but filled with urgency. She explained why she had left, why she believed in Earth's potential, and why the cycle of conquest and destruction had to end. The commander of the Empire listened, his expression hard. Tira's words might have stirred something in him once, but not now. His entire life had been built on conquest, on the certainty that might made right. The notion that Earth, a backwater planet with a pitiful military, could resist the Empire was laughable to him. "You've forgotten your place, Commander Tira," he said with icy calm. "This world will fall like all the others. Your defection was a mistake, and you will pay for it alongside these humans." Tira's heart sank. She knew this moment was coming, but it didn't make it any easier. The Empire was relentless, their culture of conquest ingrained too deeply. She glanced at her crew, all of them tense, knowing that their lives hung in the balance. But just as it seemed the commander would give the order to attack, Earth made its move. Without warning, the Empire's fleet lost communication with each other. Their vast networks, once impenetrable, went silent. The crews scrambled to re-establish contact, but every attempt failed. The Empire's ships, built for brute force, had never encountered an enemy that attacked them through nonviolent means. Their technology was designed for war, not diplomacy, and they were ill-prepared for a disruption of this kind. Earth's leadership had anticipated this moment. Using the intelligence gathered by the drones, they had found a weakness in the Empire's communications network, one that allowed them to disable the fleet's coordination without firing a single shot. It was a display of power that didn't rely on violence but on intelligence and strategy, a message to the Empire that Earth was not to be underestimated. The fleet commander stared at the flickering screens in disbelief. His ships, his mighty armada, were rendered helpless, not by weapons, but by tactics he hadn't even considered. He seethed, his pride wounded, but he could do nothing as his fleet drifted in disarray. Back on Earth, the leaders watched the standoff unfold. They had held the line, not with brute force, but by outthinking their enemy. It was a victory in itself, though no one dared celebrate yet. The Empire was still a threat, and everyone knew that the situation was far from resolved. But the humans didn't stop there. As the Empire struggled to regain control of their ships, Earth's communication networks sent out another message, this one not just to the fleet, but to the entire galaxy. It was a broadcast of Earth's intentions, of their refusal to be drawn into a war they didn't want. The message was clear: Earth was willing to negotiate, but it would not be conquered. The consequences of a galactic war would be dire for all, and the humans made it known that they had the means to disrupt the Empire's power in ways the galaxy had never seen. The boldness of the move stunned even the defectors. Tira watched, her admiration for Earth deepening. This was the strength she had seen in them, the reason she had defected. They weren't afraid to stand up to the Empire, but they didn't do it through violence. They used their ingenuity, their resilience, and their refusal to play by the Empire's rules. It was a new kind of strength, one that didn't rely on overwhelming force, but on the power of ideas and strategy. As the standoff continued, the Empire's commander faced a choice. His fleet was crippled, his communications in disarray, and the entire galaxy was now watching. To attack Earth in this state would be a disaster, but to retreat would be a humiliation. Yet, for the first time, he was forced to confront the reality that Earth was not the weak, primitive planet he had assumed it to be. After what felt like an eternity, the commander gave the order. The Empire's fleet, bruised and humiliated, began to pull back. Earth had won, not through destruction, but by forcing the Empire to see that this was not a fight they could win on their terms.